I wanted to speak briefly this evening. We started a discussion in the past about what the meaning is for us to worry about having the blessings of our Lord and the forgiveness of our sins so that we can properly approach the healing that we find necessary in our life at all times. They're companions. You cannot have one without the other, as we discussed before. And so we're really talking about, before healing can happen, we have to really recognize that we have a journey back to God. That's the task we have, to get to the healing of our hearts, our minds, our bodies. God's reconciling work in us doesn't happen, though, right away. I know we wished it would. Just make it all go away. At least I'd love that myself. But we know that God has other plans for us, and sometimes we are examples to others in our own suffering. And I think throughout our lives, each one of us has had that situation where we've had suffering that we've had to face. We've passed through it. Possibly we're going through it now, or some of us will go through it in the future. But it is a matter of suffering as an example of Christian teaching to others about our stalwart considerations of being in the faith, blessed by our God, and forgiven of our sins. If we wish to have any healing, the most important is forgiveness. Once we have forgiveness, the rest follows. Reconciliation is often a long and sometimes not a very nice process. It's a journey not confined to be completed in sacramental celebration. I think of it as more like this. It's a kind of a round-trip journey. It's sort of a double thing going on there. Sort of a round trip away from our home with God and back again, that we can sum it up in terms of the 3 C's. Remember those 3 C's we had a few weeks ago? Conversion, confession, and celebration. And we tend not to think about those. We think about confession, but in order to get confession, you have to have conversion. And once you have conversion and confession, then celebration follows. And unfortunately, the people of the book, such as Anglicans and others, we tend not to celebrate. We tend to still think that we're painfully, woefully bound by our sins, as if Christ doesn't forgive them when we ask him to. In the past, the order was different, though. It really was different, as people thought about it. Receiving the sacrament meant beginning with the recitation of sins, doesn't it? We do that every Sunday, every Mass. Then we expressed our sorrow with an act of contrition. Those that were brought up in either the Roman or the Polish National Catholic or the Orthodox faith, the act of contrition was one thing that you learned by heart by the time you were 7 years of age. As a matter of fact, it's kind of difficult. Every once in a while, I lapse back into, not the Nicene Creed, because we were always taught the Apostles' Creed. And so you start reciting the Nicene Creed, and all of a sudden the Apostles' Creed pops up, because that's what you learned when you were 6 years old, 7 years old. But still okay. So we have this act of contrition that we have to worry about. Agree to make some satisfaction of our sins by accepting our penance, whether it's through our fathers, through our marriages, whatever it might be. But our penance is really the turning back. To have penance means to be paying for something. Once we have paid for something, what do? By paying for something, we basically have repented. We are turning back. That's why the prodigal son is such an important element in the teaching of the church about what forgiveness is all about. It is turning back. What is our penance? To turn back to Jesus Christ. This helps us see why the theology suggests a reorder of the pattern. Let's look at 2 quick things or 3 quick things tonight and we'll be done. First is sin. Just to make sure we understand what we're talking about. And you'll find that in Luke 15. Luke chapter 15. And he said, and I'm going to take you back to the prodigal here. And he said, a certain man had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falleth to me. And he divided unto them his living. And not many days after, the younger son gathered all together and took his journey into a far country, and there wasted his substance with riotous living. Pretty much what everybody does when they go to college. And when he had spent it all, there arose a mighty famine in that land, and he began to be in want. Now you see what happened here. Christ not only has him expending everything that he had, But then he places him in a situation where famine occurs where there's nothing else for him to gain. He has a double entendre going on here. If you read that very carefully, very clearly there is nothing to save this young man at all, anywhere. And he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him into his fields to feed swine, as you know the story. And he would fain have filled his belly with the husks that the swine did eat, and no man gave unto him. Okay, that's the sin. Now notice what happens. What's the story all about? I have sinned, and now I'm living a base life. Why? Because I'm not going through that reconciliation, confession, celebration. But that's not the end of the story. True reconciliation. Luke 15, 17, 24. This is the conversion. Think about the young man being converted back. And when he came to himself, he said, how many hired servants of my father's have bread enough to spare that I perish with hunger? I will arise and go to my father and will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before thee, and am no more worthy to be called thy son. Make me as one of thy hired servants. And he arose and came to his father. Now remember, nothing's happened yet. He's thinking it's all in his own head. Right? The conversion doesn't require you to be with somebody else. The conversion requires you to be converted to God, not to man. So the conversion occurred between the prodigal son and heaven, not his father. That's where we make a mistake in the story. It's not the conversion back to his father, it's conversion to God. Because what happens after that? After the conversion? But yet he was a great way off. His father saw him and had compassion, and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. That's the confession. And kissed him, confession. Beginning of the conversion, the confession, and the turning. And the son said unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in thy sight, and am no more worthy to be called thy son. And then what happened? The third part. Remember, his other brother didn't like it too well. But there had to be a celebration. Right? Part of the prodigal son's story. But the father said to his servants, Bring forth the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet. And bring hither the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and be merry. For this my son was dead, and is alive again. He was lost, and is found, and they began to be merry. Celebration. That's why I get upset with Anglicans. Oh, I'm such a sinner. Yeah, so everybody else is too. No big deal. You're not a bigger sinner than anybody else is a bigger sinner. Celebration, conversion, turning, that's the key. The journey for the young man in the parable, and for us, begins with sin. His sin takes him from the home of his parents, doesn't it? As our sin takes us from the shelter of God and our own Christian community. One of the things that's, I think, most telling about Christians is that we can come to church all the time, but as long as we don't confess our sins, that we convert back to our Lord, or if you will, repent or turn back, and have a celebration for that joyous event where Christ has forgiven us, we come to church out of a false nature. We're still dragging all of our sins in a pillowcase behind us and saying, well, I'm glad I'm in church, this will help. No. We're all here for God. We're not all here for you. You're not all here for me. We're all here to be with God like the prodigal son. Praise God that we celebrate together because it plays is part of what Christ wants us to use. But his major concern in this new self-centered lifestyle, as is in ours, is sin. Right? That's really what happened to the prodigal son. His personal gratification. None of the relationships he establishes, though, the lesson tells us, is lasting. It all goes away. And not only does it go away, but then there's a famine. So he can't even go and find someone else who has something for him because nobody has anything for him. When his money runs out, as in the Western culture, so do his friends. They're gone. That's the famine. Friends are gone. If you revel in sin, and the joyousness, if you will, that the devil on sin brings others to you. But that sin will destroy you. And once you're destroyed, they go away. They don't want you anymore. Eventually, he discovers himself what? in his sin, alone, mired in the mud of a pig pen. I think it even better than that in the description. Just as he is mired in his sin. Then comes a significant phrase in the story. Quote, coming to his senses at last, is in the story, by the way. This is the beginning of the journey back, the beginning of the conversion. The next time that we come together, I want to talk about coming to one's senses, conversion, the prodigal son's lesson. If you will, the prodigal son provides us the theological background for what we are doing here tonight. We cannot have healing until there is a return or a conversion and a celebration. Healing requires, and I don't want to sound like one of those 1970s MDs where they sold, I'm okay, you're okay, all that stuff that was out years ago. But it is true that without celebration, healing cannot happen. Without returning to God in a joyous manner, healing cannot happen. Until we return to Him, it's all about us. Healing does not work through us. It works through